Hey guys, this Spanish lesson would be a relatively short one. This is lesson 5 and we'll be covering adjectives, pronouns, and adverbs. Part 1. Part 2 will be our next lesson and it might be a bit longer. In this lesson, it will mostly be you writing down notes and it's not going to be as long as the usual videos. We'll be covering possessives, demonstratives, and adjectives of nationality. So let's get started. Possessive adjectives, and pronouns. So possessive adjectives precede noun, and as the name says, they show possession. So you would say my, for example, you can say my car. That would be mi carro, mis carros, my cars. The S stands for plural. Your would be tu. His, her, their, your, all of those, you can say su. And notice that it says your, that's your formal, because as we talked about in subject pronouns, your formal or you formal is usted, and it has the third person conjugation. Similarly, it has the third person possessive adjective. Nuestro or nuestra is ours, depending on if the noun is masculine or feminine. You can say nuestro carro, nuestros carros, nuestra casa, that's our house, nuestras casas, our houses. Vuestro is similar to nuestro, except it's your all, like y'all's, basically. You can say y'all's car by saying vuestro carro. And there's also long form possessive adjectives, and these follow noun. We talked about possessive adjectives that precede noun. So I'm going to quickly show you an example of this. Mi caro. I gave you this example already, but I'm just going to write it down because this is important to see the difference between possessive adjectives, long form possessive adjectives, and possessive pronouns. As you can see, the word is different. Mio, mia, mios, mias. And now even for my, it depends on if the noun is feminine, plural, masculine, or singular. Basically, in this, it depends on the gender and the number. In these, most of it just depended on the number. Tuyo, tuya, tuyos, tuyas is your. Suyo, suya, suyos, suyas. His, her, their, your. Nuestro, nuestros, nuestra, nuestras, our. It's the same as the possessive adjectives, which might get a bit confusing. You just have to look at the position. Vuestro or vuestra, vuestros, vuestras. It's also y'all's or your. If we were trying to convey the same message, in this time, if we were to use long form possessive adjectives, we would use el carro mío. That's saying the car mine, basically. The car that's mine. Just remember the position. And now we're also going to be looking at possessive pronouns, in which things get a little more confusing. These replace the noun because the definition of pronoun is a word that replaces the noun. And this is always used with a definite article. And yes, it's the same exact word as the long form possessive adjectives, except this one, you can tell the difference when there is no noun. So again, I'll show you an example. Possessive adjectives, it'll be mi caro. Long form possessive adjectives, it'll be el carro mío. And possessive pronouns, you would say el mío. You might be wondering, how do we know it's a car? Well, we usually use possessive pronouns when we already specify the noun. For example, we can say, tu carro es sucio, which means your car is dirty. Pero el mío es nuevo. That means, but mine is new. You see where I'm getting at? In English, we would say your car is dirty, but mine is new. We won't say your car is dirty, but my car is new. Well, we might, but it's better to say mine. That's the pronoun, but mine is new. We don't mention the car anywhere there. In this case, in Spanish, we would say tu carro es sucio, pero el mío es nuevo. It's important to understand the difference between all three of these because some of the words are the same and the position's obviously different. The rest of the possessive pronouns are the same as the long form possessive adjectives. Tuyo, suyo, nuestro, vuestro. There's one more thing to consider. When you have a possessive pronoun after ser, the definite article is omitted. Remember when I said, pero el mío es nuevo? You can also say, es mío. If someone says, oh, that's my car, you can say, no, es mío, it's mine. Notice we don't say es el mío, that means that's the mine. In this case, we would get rid of the definite article and we would say es mío. And yes, it does sound like kids arguing over a crayon or whatever. I mean, who even argues about cars? Okay, demonstratives. So again, there's adjectives and pronouns. Demonstrative adjectives precede nouns. So when you're near the speaker, it's different from when you're far from the speaker and when you're way far from the speaker. We're going to split this into near speaker, near listener, or near receiver, or whatever, near the other person, and then far from both. And yes, it's confusing because there's different for each. Demonstrative adjectives is basically defining something. So you would, for example, say this, these, those. That's all you're saying. This is for near speaker. These is for plural near speaker. Those is for far from speaker. You can also say that if you're doing it singular, far from speaker. This, that, these, those. But here we have different ones for each gender, for each number. So este or esta, depending on gender. Estos or estas, depending on gender. So for example, you can say este carro, which means this car, or estos carros, which means these cars. Near listener is ese or esa, depending on gender. Esos or esas, depending on gender. Far from both speaker and listener, aquel or aquella, aquellos or aquellas. Note that these are much different from the previous ones. In the previous ones, you just get rid of the T to get to the other one. But in this one, it's a completely different word altogether. And one last thing to note, the double L, it's basically like a Y. Remember from the alphabet, we did double L sounds like aye. Yes, basically, it sounds like aquella, not aquella. So that's it for demonstrative adjectives. Now we go to demonstrative pronouns, which replace the noun. And this is similar to possessive pronouns. When you're near the speaker, you use este or esta. And notice the accent. This doesn't really signify a change in pronunciation, even though some people do change their pronunciation. But it's just to differentiate from the demonstrative adjectives. Notice that there is no el or la. There's no definite article before it. You just say este. Me gusta este. I like this. Instead, you would say, using demonstrative adjectives, you would say me gusta este carro. Here you would say me gusta este. You're basically replacing it. Not as confusing as possessive pronouns because you don't have to remember about long forms or you don't have to worry about definite articles. Again, estos or estas. Near listener, ese or esa. Esos or esas. Far from both, aquel or aquella. Aquellos or aquellas. Notice that the accent is in a different spot, but again, it just says that it's different. There's also one more thing called the neutered demonstrative pronoun, and it's when it's an unknown or general object. And this is just esto, eso, or aquello. This is not like any of the others. These use ese or este, este or ese. This one's just esto, eso, aquello. You can say, if you don't know what you're talking about, you can just say esto or eso or aquello. This does not replace the demonstrative adjectives or pronouns because when you actually know the object, you would have to use these adjectives and pronouns. When you don't, or if it's just a general object, then you use these. Now we finally come to the last part of our lesson, and probably the shortest, because I'm not going to explain these. First, I have the continents here, and it's about adjectives of nationality. It's just how would you describe someone living in a place? And I also included how you would say that place in Spanish, just for reference. So I did the continents first because you probably might say, if you're from, let's say, America, you would say, I'm American. If you're from Asia, you would say, I'm Asian. So this is the first thing to know. Africa is Africa, and it's Africano. And I'm not going to explain everything because this is a really big list, but it's nothing compared to how much countries I have. Oh, yes. This, if you want to take notes, which I strongly advise you do, you probably should, but I'm not going to go through each and every one. Notice there's a difference between North America and South America. You would say Norte America, Sudamerica, and Norte Americano, Sudamericano. So some general rules about adjectives of nationality before we get into the actual countries. If it ends in a consonant, A is added for feminine. So if I had any adjective that I'll show you in the next slides, I'll just add an A for the feminine. I'll give you an example on the next slide when we actually get to the adjectives. If it ends in O, you change to A for feminine. So like we did with normal adjectives. If it ends in vowel other than O, you don't change it. This is basically like a normal adjective. Like I said, north becomes norte, south becomes sur. And now we get to the actual countries. I'm not going to go through all of them because it would mentally drain me. But I'll just show you these ones. And yes, they look to be in alphabetical order, but why is Saudi Arabia here on the top? And why is Germany even before that? Well, it's because we're talking about the Spanish version. In Spanish, Germany is Alemania, which starts with an A, so it's right at the top. Here's a list of the first few countries. If you want, you can pause and take notes on this. It's usually required for students in Spanish to learn about the Spanish-speaking countries and their nationalities. But if you want to be an overachiever and just write down everything, which I like to do, then here's your list. I'll linger here for another second. You can pause if you want to before I go on to the next slide. Some more countries. Here is, I believe, the rest of it. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comment. If you want any other country's nationality, either Google it or leave it in the comments. But this should be exhaustive, at least for Spanish class, if not more. So like I said, next lesson will be lesson 6, and it's the part 2 of what we did. I know we didn't touch on adverbs, so we probably shouldn't call this adjectives, pronouns, and adverbs, because we didn't even talk about adverbs this lesson. But I'm not going to say adjectives and pronouns part 1, adjectives, pronouns, and adverbs part 2. That just sounds awkward. So like it or not, this is the title. So I'll see you next time.